Hey everyone, I'm Cappy and you're watching Beyond the Plate, but just a taste. If you'd like to hear this podcast episode in its entirety, you can do so on all major podcast platforms. As for me, I'm a chef by trade and hospitality professional. These days, I head up Rachel Ray's culinary operations and co-founded her cooking and kids charity called Yummo. 5 years ago, I had the idea to put together a podcast where we sit down with the world's culinary elite and explore their journey into the food industry and the social impact they have made in their community, how they give back, hence the name Beyond the Plate. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you listened before, we're so glad you're back. We're bringing you a little taste of our full audio episodes here and hope it inspires you to cook or, like the chefs we feature, make a difference in your community. Reminder, the entire conversation is on our podcast Beyond the Plate. On to this week's episode. Chef, you've written how your style of cooking has changed over the years. I know earlier on in this episode we talked about kind of like what you've done for vegetables and things like that, but how would you say your style of cooking has changed?
It's changed in when I look at the old books, and then when I also look at old menus in our restaurants, I think I used to be much more eager to really just put a lot out there. You know, there was this maximalism that I mentioned. It's just like I wanted to make sure that it's all out there, lots of herbs, lots of things. I mean, now I find myself thinking once or twice before I add something.
Interesting.
Because I think, and one of the things that was quite transformative for me was when I took on to write the book called Simple that was published in 2018. And I asked myself the question, can you create an Ottolenghi dish that someone would recognize, an Ottolenghi dish with fewer ingredients and simpler processes and things that are less demanding of the home cook? And I think it worked out, and it taught me a real important lesson that I'm trying hard to kind of instill in everybody at the test kitchen right now, that you know, it's very culture specific. Like, for instance, like I mentioned, you know, Italian food culture, especially for some parts of Italy, it is about like 3 great ingredients put together in a thoughtful way, in a considered manner. And that's all you need to do. It's just about that. But then you go travel to other parts of the world and you can have like 12 spices that go into a spice base and cooked in oil. And you've got this kind of explosion of flavor. And it's not better or worse, it's just different. It's different ways of looking in food, and they're all as good as each other. And each cuisine you judge by its own merits, you know, by its own standards. You know, you judge Italian food by its own standards, and you judge Malaysian food by its own standards. You don't apply the same measurements.
That's
and I
interesting.
think that for me, I now see my cooking as something that I could actually. So there is this kind of Ottolenghi, what we understand as Ottolenghi food. When I tried to explain to you during this conversation, that intensity and the bold gestures and the platters and the contrast, etc. But even by those standards, you can take a step back and have like 3 elements rather than 5. You can have something which you can cook in half an hour and put together, but there's still an element of surprise. There's still a left of field idea. There's still an unusual combination, but with less effort. And so this is the way I tend to go more these days.
That's neat. I like that. I remember one of the first nights when I started culinary school, we had a reception at the president of the school's house, and the president of the school at the time was a globally regarded, renowned chef. And I remember him standing up there saying, when you're cooking in the kitchen and you have a dish, you should think, what one ingredient can I remove and still have that dish
totally
speak volumes, you know? And there's people who cook with, like you said, lots of ingredients. And, you know, for some people, it's like more is more. And for some people, it's like less is more. So, but that's interesting.
I totally agree with this question, and I ask myself the same question: what can we remove? And I find myself irritatingly asking my colleagues, what could we remove? Could we possibly remove that from that dish? And people fight for their dishes and for all the right reasons, because something has gone through a process and you love it, and that's good. But also you need to think how it lands on the other side, like how it lands at people's kitchens. Like, do they really want 5 herbs, or maybe 3 or 2 would have been enough and still gave them a very satisfactory result? So these are the kind of conversations we have.
It's interesting. And so people have said things like, you've made the world love vegetables. How does that make you feel?
Great. I mean, for me, the most exciting thing is yes, is dishes that people cook all over and over again in their house, in their homes. That I meet someone, they go, what? My mom used to cook that for me, or I started cooking that for my kids, and now we cook that all the time. Those kind of things makes me feel great, because books come and go, and visits to restaurants come and go. But if someone has a dish in their repertoire that becomes their dish, it means that you really you kind of make an impact. And with vegetables, obviously, because I think in the West, let's say Europe and North America and some other parts of the world, vegetables have been forgotten, relegated, and kind of made put in a position where they were not really something that people celebrated, and for all the wrong reasons. I mean, there's nothing inherently better with other foodstuffs, and in some ways vegetables are way more attractive to a cook, because you can do more with them. There's more transformational possibilities with vegetables. A cauliflower is way more interesting for me than a fillet steak, because there's just so much to do in terms of techniques. You can eat it raw, you can cook it lightly, you can cook it heavily, you can slow cook it, you can grate it, you can turn it into a steak, you can turn it to a million things, and it will just keep on giving. The same doesn't apply to meat or even a fish. Not to say that they're not delicious, but I'm just kind of recalibrating here. And so this is a great thing. And again, like all the recipes, I'm sure I can't count how many recipes for cauliflowers I've published over the years, many. And the fact that is out there and people can choose to make those and learn to love the cauliflower, makes me feel amazingly good.
I love it. I'm sensing a theme, hopefully, this season of the podcast, because we had Chef Danielle Hum on as well from, Love in Madison Park, who's gone more plant forward, and he spoke about, his love of vegetables and, how much.
And he's doing it. And I have to say that he does an amazing. I mean, I haven't been to 11 Madison Park in its vegan incarnation, but I've been to his other restaurants, to Nomad, and they did amazing things with vegetables at that point, and I loved it.
All right, so in the new book, I see the word Ottolenghi-fy. To Ottolenghi-fy something, to make something feel unequivocally Ottolenghi, to add flair, a slight twist to the familiar, a surprise in the mouth. I've got to ask, and I apologize because you've likely gotten this question, but I know aubergine eggplants are your thing. Which eggplant recipe must we attack?
Oh gosh, it's just so difficult for me to answer this question. I have to say, so I this definition of Ottolenghi that you just quoted, Noor put it in the Urban Dictionary, and I'm glad it's there. It's great. I mean, hopefully one day we'll get to Wikipedia. Fingers crossed. But I think the aubergine. I think the recipe. There is a recipe in Extra Good Things that I just love, and it requires burning an eggplant or grilling an eggplant, which is, I think, a technique that people who haven't done it before may find intimidating, but actually it's a very easy thing to do, and you can do it in multiple ways. You can actually grill it on a barbecue. It's just taking a whole eggplant. You can do it in your oven. You can do it on a char grill pan over in your stove in the kitchen while you put on the extraction, so it doesn't smell the whole kitchen. there's a multiple of ways to do it, and they're all as gratifying as the others. Some of them will give you a more smoky result, and some of them will be less smoky. But I think once you can master baba ganoush, and that is just a generic name to a bunch of salads and dishes that involved smoking an aubergine, then I think you'll be a much happier person.
Yeah.
And so will the people around you. So that would be the one that I would really recommend for people to try. We have a recipe here that involves this technique, and then the pulp, the aubergine flesh, turns into a pickle, and it's got fenugreek. It's a sweet and sour and fenugreeky, so it's got a kind of a curryish like flavor. And you put it in a jar, and you put olive oil on top, and you can keep it for a few days in the fridge. So you get this kind of it's slightly pickled. It's not like pickle, but it gives you this kind of acidity and sweetness that you want. I love that, and that's served with yogurt or with tahini, or you can serve it as to accompany anything you like. I think it goes really well with meat as well. Is a huge achievement for someone who maybe has been terrified of eggplants up until this moment.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds so good. Thanks for watching and listening to Beyond the Plate. We hope you enjoyed a little taste of this episode. If you'd like to hear this podcast episode in its entirety, you can do so on all major podcast platforms. I'm Cappy, and remember, there are never too many cooks in the kitchen.